Have you ever poured your heart and soul into planting a beautiful spring garden, only to wake up one morning and find your precious plants turned to black mush? The dreaded late spring frost, known to many generations as the ice saints, is the ultimate heartbreak for any gardener. We are told that the only way to survive this unpredictable weather is to spend a fortune on expensive commercial frost blankets, fancy glass cloches, and heavy-duty plastic tunnels. But what if I told you that the gardening industry has been lying to you? What if the most powerful tools to save your delicate tomatoes and blooming fruit trees are sitting in your yard right now, costing absolutely nothing? In this video, we are going to explore how to protect your survival garden from sudden freezing temperatures using smart, lazy, $0 methods. You are going to discover why doing exactly the opposite of what your neighbors are doing will actually triple your spring harvest. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never look at an empty water jug or a pile of dead weeds the same way again. But the real question is, are you ready to stop fighting nature and start using it to your advantage? Let me know in the comments if you have ever lost a crop to a surprise May frost. Before we dive into the exact methods to save your garden, we need to understand our enemy. For centuries, farmers across Europe have feared a phenomenon called the ice saints. This refers to a specific window in mid-May where a sudden, brutal cold snap sweeps across the land, completely destroying the young, tender growth of spring. While the specific dates might change depending on where you live in the world, the threat of a late radiation frost is universal. Radiation frost happens on nights with perfectly clear skies and zero wind. Without a blanket of clouds to trap the heat, the warmth absorbed by the earth during the day simply radiates straight up into the freezing atmosphere. As the heat escapes, the cold air settles heavily onto the ground, freezing the water inside your plant cells and shattering them from the inside out. Understanding this basic biology is your secret weapon. We do not need to create heat to save our plants. We simply need to trap the heat that the earth is already trying to give away. By capturing that invisible thermal energy, we can create a life-saving microclimate around our crops without spending a single dime. Let us start with the most powerful and completely free tool you already have in your garden: water. You might think that adding water to your garden right before a freezing night is a terrible idea. Most people assume that wet soil will just turn into a giant block of ice and freeze the roots of their precious tomato plants. But the exact opposite is true. This is the secret of the thermal battery. Think of the soil in your garden beds like a giant sponge that absorbs heat from the sun all day long. Dry soil is mostly filled with air pockets, and air is a terrible conductor of heat. It loses whatever warmth it gathered incredibly fast once the sun goes down. But wet soil acts entirely differently. Water holds on to heat beautifully. By giving your garden a deep, thorough soaking in the late afternoon before a predicted frost, you are essentially charging up a massive natural heater. As the night air cools down to freezing temperatures, that moist soil slowly releases its stored heat upwards into the air right around your plants. This invisible cloud of warmth can raise the temperature around your delicate crops by up to 3 degrees. And in the world of late spring frosts, 3 degrees is the difference between life and death for your harvest. So, before you panic and start throwing blankets over everything, grab your hose. Give the base of your fruit trees and your vegetable beds a really good drink. You are putting a warm water bottle right at the feet of your plants, and it will not cost you a single penny. Let us talk about a mistake that ruins countless gardens every single spring. As soon as the frost warning hits the local news, people panic. They run out to the garden with rolls of plastic wrap, plastic garbage bags, and plastic tarps. They wrap their bushes and cover their raised beds, thinking they have created a perfect waterproof shield. This is a fatal error. Plastic is a terrible insulator. It does not trap the heat rising from the soil. Even worse, wherever the plastic touches the leaves of your plants, it conducts the freezing cold directly into the plant tissue. If you leave plastic on when the morning sun comes up, it instantly turns into an oven, cooking your already stressed plants. Instead of plastic, you need to use materials that breathe and actually trap warm air. Look around your house for old cotton bed sheets, thin fleece blankets, or even burlap sacks. These natural woven materials create a tiny pocket of insulation. They catch the warm air rising from the earth and hold it around the leaves. When you use a cotton sheet, make sure it drapes all the way down to the soil level. Do not just tie it around the trunk of the plant like a lollipop. You want to create a tent that traps the soil heat inside. Pin the edges to the ground with rocks or bricks. This $0 swap from plastic to old cotton will save your harvest and keep your plants breathing happily all night long. Now let us look at the heavy lifting of lazy gardening. I am talking about stones, bricks, and concrete blocks. You probably have these scattered around your property doing absolutely nothing. It is time to put them to work as free heating units for your garden. This concept is called thermal mass. Dark and dense objects absorb the heat of the sun during the day and store it deep inside. When the temperature drops rapidly at night, these dense objects release that heat very slowly back into the immediate environment. If you have a sensitive fruit tree that just blossomed, or a bed of young peppers, gather your scattered rocks. Place them directly at the base of the plants, facing the south side so they catch the maximum amount of daytime sunlight. The darker the rocks, the better they will work. A solid ring of heavy stones around a newly planted vegetable works like a miniature radiator. As the frost settles in, the slow release of heat from those stones pushes the freezing air just high enough to miss the delicate lower leaves. You do not have to move them every day. Just set them up once in the early spring and leave them there until the danger of frost has completely passed. It is the ultimate plant and forget method. You are basically building a tiny, warm fortress for your plants out of materials that nature gave you for free. If you do not have heavy rocks lying around, you can create your own thermal mass using something you normally throw in the recycling bin. Empty milk jugs and large plastic water bottles are your best friends during the frost season. Fill these empty plastic containers all the way to the top with tap water. If you want to supercharge this method, add a few drops of dark food coloring or some crushed charcoal to the water to make it black. Dark colors absorb significantly more solar radiation than clear or white objects. Place these water-filled jugs snugly between your vegetable plants in your raised beds. During the day, the water inside the jugs heats up under the spring sun. Because water has an incredibly high specific heat capacity, it takes a very long time for it to cool down. When the freezing night arrives, those jugs act like hot water bottles tucked into bed with your plants. The heat radiating off a single-gallon jug can protect a radius of up to 12 inches from frost damage. Place 4 jugs around a newly planted tomato, and you have built an invisible wall of warmth. When the cold season ends, you just empty the water onto your beds and put the jugs away for next year. It requires almost zero effort, costs absolutely nothing, and recycles household waste into survival garden gear. Here is a secret that will make every lazy gardener smile. Sometimes, the best way to protect your plants is to stop weeding. Yes, you heard me right. Leaving weeds around your tender young vegetables can actually save their lives during a late spring freeze. We call this the nurse crop method. When you meticulously pull every single weed to make your garden look perfectly neat, you expose your young seedlings to harsh winds and direct frost. Small weeds growing near your crops act as a tiny forest. They create a microclimate at the soil level. They slow down the cold air currents that sweep across the garden at night. They also trap the heat radiating from the soil, keeping it closer to the ground where your actual crops are sitting. The weeds take the hit from the settling frost, sacrificing their uppermost leaves while the small vegetable seedling underneath stays safe. Obviously, you do not want weeds choking out your plants all season. But during those unpredictable weeks of early spring, let the weeds grow just an inch or two taller than your delicate seedlings. They form a natural $0 blanket. Once the danger of the ice saints has passed and the nights are consistently warm, you can go ahead and pull those weeds out. You drop them right there as mulch, turning your frost protectors into free fertilizer. Let us talk about a secret weapon that comes straight from your winter fireplace: wood ash. Most people just throw this away, but it is actually a powerful tool for building frost resistance from the inside out. Wood ash is incredibly rich in potassium. Potassium is the key mineral that plants use to regulate water inside their cells. When a plant absorbs high levels of potassium, the sap inside its stems and leaves becomes thicker. It is basically the same principle as adding antifreeze to your car engine. A plant with thick, mineral-rich sap freezes at a much lower temperature than a plant full of thin, watery sap. A few weeks before the expected late frosts, take a handful of cold wood ash and sprinkle it lightly around the base of your fruit bushes and vegetable beds. Water it in well so the roots can absorb the nutrients immediately. The plant will pull that potassium up into its tissues, instantly toughening its cellular walls. When the frost hits, the cells will not burst as easily because the concentrated sap resists freezing. It is important to only use ash from natural, untreated wood, and you should not overdo it. A light dusting is all you need. This internal armor costs you nothing and makes your garden naturally resilient. You are literally using the ashes of winter to protect the birth of spring. You have probably seen people buy expensive glass cloches to protect their prized plants. But you can achieve the exact same greenhouse effect using common items lying around your shed. I am talking about empty plastic buckets, old nursery pots, and even large mixing bowls. This is the inverted bucket method. When the sun goes down and the temperature plummets, simply take an upside-down bucket and place it directly over your vulnerable plant. But here is the trick that most people miss. You cannot just drop the bucket and walk away. If there is a gap between the rim of the bucket and the ground, the cold air will simply flow underneath and trap the freezing temperatures inside. You must seal the edges. Press the bucket firmly into the soft earth, or pile a little bit of soil around the bottom rim to create an airtight seal. This traps the residual heat radiating from the ground directly inside the bucket. It acts like a tiny, solid tent that blocks the freezing wind and holding the earth's warmth. Just remember the golden rule of this method. You must go out in the morning and remove the buckets as soon as the sun comes up. If you leave a sealed bucket over a plant during a sunny morning, it will bake your plant alive in less than 2 hours. It is a simple evening chore that ensures your plants wake up safe. If you grow fruit trees, this next lazy method is going to change your life. We are talking about delayed pruning. Every gardening book tells you to prune your apple and cherry trees in the late winter while they are fully dormant. But if you live in an area notorious for late spring frosts, picking up your pruning shears too early is a massive mistake. When you cut back a branch, you force the tree to focus all its energy into a few remaining buds. Those few buds will wake up earlier, swell up faster, and bloom sooner. And early blooms are exactly what get destroyed by late frosts. By waiting to prune until the buds actually start to show color, you are using the tree's natural defense mechanism. The tree will spread its energy across hundreds of extra buds. The ones at the very tips of the branches will open first. If a sudden freeze wipes them out, it is not a disaster. You still have countless unopened buds further down the branch, acting as an insurance policy. After the late frost has passed, you can then go in and prune away the dead tips, leaving the late-blooming buds safely intact. You are literally letting the tree provide its own sacrificial layer of protection. Sometimes procrastinating on your garden chores is the smartest $0 strategy you can use. To truly master the art of $0 frost protection, you must understand how cold air actually moves. Cold air behaves exactly like water. It is heavy, it sinks, and it flows downhill. On a perfectly still, clear night, the freezing air will roll down the slopes of your property and pool in the lowest spots. We call these low spots frost pockets. If your garden is sitting at the bottom of a gentle slope, it is sitting right in a lake of invisible freezing air. But you can manipulate this flow without moving your garden at all. You can create a cold air drainage channel. Walk to the lowest point of your garden and look at what is blocking the air from moving further down. Is it a solid wooden fence? Is it a thick row of dense bushes? That barrier is acting like a dam, holding the freezing air right on top of your vegetables. By simply opening a gate, removing a bottom board from a fence, or pruning a gap in a hedge at the lowest point, you allow the heavy, cold air to drain away from your plants. It will literally flow out of the garden and continue down the hill. Managing the invisible river of cold air requires absolutely no money. It just requires you to observe the terrain of your yard and clear a path for the freezing temperature to escape. This next method sounds completely insane, but it is utilized by professional fruit orchards all over the world. It involves fighting ice with more ice. If a severe, devastating frost is predicted and you have fruit trees in full bloom, you can save the blossoms by turning on a simple overhead sprinkler. You set up a regular lawn sprinkler to gently spray water over the canopy of your fruit trees, and you turn it on right as the temperature hits freezing. You leave it running all night long until the sun comes up and the ice begins to melt naturally. As the water constantly freezes on the branches and blossoms, an incredible scientific reaction occurs. The act of water turning from a liquid into a solid ice crystal actually releases a tiny amount of latent heat. As long as liquid water is continuously freezing on top of the plant, the temperature of the plant tissue will stay perfectly balanced at exactly 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. This prevents the tissue from dropping into the lethal zone of 28 degrees or lower. Your tree will look like a beautiful, terrifying ice sculpture by morning. But underneath that clear layer of ice, the delicate blooms are completely protected. It costs nothing but a few gallons of tap water and saves your entire fruit crop. Let us talk about cardboard. Every household has empty delivery boxes piled up in the garage. These cardboard boxes are magical when it comes to late spring frosts. Cardboard is made of corrugated paper, which means it is full of tiny, trapped air channels. Those air channels make it one of the best free insulating materials on the planet. When a cold snap threatens your raised beds, simply break down a few large cardboard boxes and lay them gently over your plants. You can fold them into little A-frame tents over your rows of beans, or just drop a whole square box upside down over a larger pepper plant. Unlike thin plastic, cardboard actually breathes. It will absorb excess moisture from the air, preventing the damp chill that often accompanies a frost. The thick, corrugated walls trap the radiant heat rising from the soil incredibly well. If the wind picks up, just throw a rock or a heavy stick on top of the cardboard to keep it from blowing away. The best part is that if you accidentally forget to remove the cardboard the next morning, your plants will not instantly cook. They will be in the dark, but they will not be baked alive like they would under plastic. At the end of the season, you just throw the worn-out cardboard into the compost pile. It is the ultimate zero-waste gardening tool. Have you ever noticed that frost damage is always worse on the side of the garden facing the wind? That is because wind strips away the tiny boundary layer of warmth that plants naturally try to maintain around their leaves. It causes rapid evaporative cooling, dropping the temperature of the plant much faster than the surrounding air. To stop this, you do not need expensive row covers. You just need to build a temporary $0 windbreak. Look around your yard. Grab your wheelbarrows, empty trash cans, large pieces of scrap wood, or even old doors. Position these large objects strategically on the side of your garden where the prevailing night wind comes from. You are essentially building a temporary barricade against the cold front. By blocking the wind, you create a calm microclimate behind the barrier. In this zone of still air, the heat radiating off the soil is not blown away immediately. It lingers, keeping the ambient temperature around your crops just a fraction higher. You can lean old rakes and shovels together and drape a heavy tarp over them to create a solid wall. You do not need to cover the plants themselves. You just need to stop the wind from stealing their warmth. When the cold front passes, you just put your tools back in the shed. Simple, fast, and totally free. Mulch is usually something we use to keep weeds down and hold moisture during the hot summer. But in a late spring frost emergency, the mulch you already have on hand becomes an emergency blanket. I am talking about dry leaves left over from autumn, straw from your compost pile, or even grass clippings. If you have young, low-growing crops like strawberries, potatoes that just poked through the soil, or tender lettuce, you can bury them completely. When the temperature plunges, go out with a basket of loose straw or dry leaves and simply pile it right on top of the plants. Cover the crowns and the leaves entirely until you cannot see green anymore. This thick, fluffy layer of organic matter traps huge amounts of air. It insulates the tender green shoots from the freezing air above. The plants will be sitting snugly in the ambient warmth of the earth. Because the organic material is light and breathable, it will not crush the fragile stems. The next afternoon, when the sun is shining and the danger has passed, gently brush the mulch back away from the crowns so the plants can get sunlight. You do not even have to move the mulch out of the garden, just pull it to the side, letting it do its normal job of feeding the soil. It is a quick, completely free way to tuck your garden into bed for the night. Sometimes the easiest way to protect a plant is to use the very dirt it is growing in. This is an old farmer trick called temporary hilling or berming. The earth is a massive reservoir of stable heat. If you have delicate stems on young tomato plants, peppers, or even newly grafted fruit tree saplings, you can use the surrounding soil to protect the most vital part of the plant. The crown and the main stem are the heart of the plant. If the top leaves get a little frostbite, the plant can usually recover. But if the main lower stem freezes solid, the entire plant dies. To prevent this, take a small hand trowel or just use your bare hands to mound up dry, loose soil directly around the base of the stem. Build a little volcano of dirt going a few inches up the stalk. This thick collar of soil insulates the critical vascular system of the plant. It anchors the stem against freezing winds and transfers the deeper ground warmth straight into the plant. It takes merely seconds per plant to pile up a handful of dirt. Once the cold snap is over, you simply gently push the dirt back out flat so the stem does not rot from excess moisture. You are literally using the garden to protect the garden. No special equipment is required, just a few minutes of your time before the sun goes down. Let us talk about the condition of your garden beds. Many gardeners think that a freshly tilled, fluffy garden bed is the ideal environment for their spring plants. They love the look of dark, loose soil. But when it comes to fighting frost, fluffy soil is actually your worst enemy. Remember how we talked about the soil acting like a thermal battery? For the earth to absorb the sun's heat effectively, it needs to be dense. Tilled, fluffy soil is full of massive air gaps. It acts like a fluffy winter coat, which sounds good, but it actually insulates the ground from the sun. The sun's rays cannot penetrate deep into the fluffy soil to warm it up. Even worse, the air gaps prevent the deep heat of the earth from rising to the surface at night. If you know a late frost is coming, do not cultivate your beds. Do not fluff the dirt. You actually want the soil surface to be relatively firm and compacted. Bare, firm, and moist soil absorbs huge amounts of solar radiation during the day and easily releases it upwards at night. If you have just turned the soil, you might even want to lightly tamp it down around your delicate plants. Leaving your soil undisturbed is not just the ultimate lazy gardening technique. It is scientifically proven to keep your garden warmer during a deadly spring freeze. Here is an incredibly creative, $0 method that utilizes yard waste to protect your precious vegetables. I call it the chopped branch canopy. In the spring, there are always dead branches falling from large shade trees, or perhaps you are doing some late pruning on your ornamental bushes. Do not drag these branches to the burn pile just yet. Gather branches that have lots of dense twigs or evergreen needles still attached. Pine boughs and cedar branches are absolutely perfect for this. Take these large, bushy branches and simply stab the thick ends into the soil right next to your vulnerable plants. Angle them so they lean directly over the top of your crops, creating a natural umbrella. Frost does not just move sideways, it settles straight down from the clear night sky. By placing a thick, bushy branch directly above your tomato or pepper plant, you intercept that settling frost. The ice crystals will form on the dead pine needles instead of your delicate green leaves. The canopy also helps trap the rising ground heat underneath it. It is like building a tiny forest over your vegetable bed. You do not have to mess with tying down sheets or sealing buckets. You just stick a few branches in the mud and walk away. When summer arrives, toss the dry branches into the fire pit. When the weather forecast predicts a truly deep freeze, a single layer of protection might not be enough. But you still do not need to buy expensive, heavy-duty frost blankets. You just need to use the double-layer insulation technique with materials from around the house. The secret to extreme insulation is not the thickness of the material itself, but the layer of dead air trapped in between. You can combine the methods we have already discussed to create an impenetrable fortress of warmth. First, place an inverted plastic bucket or a cardboard box over the plant to trap the initial ground heat. Then, drape a large old bed sheet or a light tarp completely over the bucket, pinning the edges to the ground. The space between the solid bucket and the fabric sheet creates an incredible pocket of insulating air. The freezing cold has to penetrate the outer fabric, cool down the air gap, and then penetrate the solid bucket before it even reaches the plant. This $0 double-layer technique can save your delicate crops even when temperatures drop down into the mid-20s. It takes a few extra minutes to set up, but when you wake up to a world covered in thick white frost, you will pull back those layers and find your plants completely untouched and thriving in their cozy little cave. Another brilliant, absolutely free way to boost your plant's resilience against frost is through a homemade foliar spray. You do not need expensive commercial fertilizers to toughen up your garden. You just need to make a quick compost tea or seaweed extract if you live near the coast. Plants naturally produce their own antifreeze proteins when they are healthy and well-nourished. If you have a compost pile, Grab a handful of rich, dark compost and soak it in a bucket of water for a day. Strain the brown liquid and put it in a cheap spray bottle. 2 days before the expected frost, spray the leaves of your sensitive plants with this nutrient-rich tea. The plant will absorb these trace minerals directly through the leaves. This rapid intake of nutrients signals the plant to strengthen its cell walls and increase the concentration of sugars and salts in its sap. It is like giving your garden a shot of pure vitamins right before a storm. A well-fed plant can survive temperature drops that would instantly kill a weak, starving plant. You are using the decomposed waste from your own kitchen to chemically alter the freezing point of your vegetables. It is pure, biological magic. It costs absolutely nothing, and it leaves your garden healthier than it was before the cold snap arrived. What happens if you did not check the weather, and you wake up to find your precious plants covered in a layer of white frost? Do not panic, and absolutely do not touch them. The biggest mistake gardeners make happens the morning after the freeze. People see their frozen plants and immediately try to warm them up. They pour warm water over the leaves, or they try to rub the frost off with their hands. This guarantees the death of the plant. When plant cells freeze, they become as fragile as glass. If you touch them, the cell walls literally shatter. If you hit them with warm water, the rapid change in temperature causes the cells to explode. The secret to saving a frosted plant is a slow, gentle thaw. If the morning sun is going to hit the frozen plant immediately, you actually need to shade it. Throw a piece of cardboard or a sheet over the plant to block the direct morning sunlight. You want the air temperature to slowly melt the frost over several hours. Allowing the plant to thaw slowly in the shade gives the damaged cells a chance to reabsorb the water that leaked out during the freeze. You will be amazed at how many plants look completely dead at dawn, but will perk right back up by the afternoon if you just leave them alone and let them thaw in the shadows. Patience is completely free. The absolute ultimate lazy method to protect your survival garden from late frosts requires no blankets, no buckets, and no water jugs. It requires you to throw away your calendar and listen to the weeds. So many gardeners plant their delicate crops based on an arbitrary date they saw on the internet. They plant their tomatoes on May 1st and then spend 2 weeks desperately fighting off the ice saints. The smartest $0 strategy is simply to wait. But how do you know when the soil is truly safe and warm? You watch the indicator weeds. Nature has a built-in thermometer. Dandelions, for instance, will pop up early, but wait until you see the true warm weather weeds germinating. When you see wild amaranth or lamb's quarters naturally sprouting in the bare soil of your yard, nature is telling you that the deep soil temperature is permanently warm. These wild plants will not risk their seeds until the danger of frost has truly passed. By letting the local wild ecosystem dictate your planting schedule, you avoid the stressful, exhausting battle against the cold altogether. You keep your seedlings safe and warm indoors or on a windowsill for just 1 extra week. Waiting costs $0, requires zero physical labor, and is the true hallmark of an incredibly smart, lazy gardener. We have just covered the most effective $0 methods to outsmart the late spring frosts. The biggest takeaway here is that you do not need to rely on expensive garden centers to build a resilient survival garden. The earth provides its own thermal mass. The trees provide their own sacrificial buds, and your household waste can be upcycled into incredible heat-trapping shields. The smartest gardeners are the ones who work with nature, utilizing rocks, water, and simple air gaps to bend the microclimate to their will. By applying these lazy but brilliant strategies, you are not just saving money today. You are building a stronger, more adaptable garden that will feed your family for years to come. Remember, The true secret to an abundant harvest is not working harder, but observing closer and acting smarter. Thank you so much for watching and learning how to protect your garden the natural way. If these $0 tips helped you prepare for the upcoming cold snaps, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more smart gardening secrets. Now, I have a question for you to answer in the comments below. What is the lowest temperature your garden has ever unexpectedly survived? And what did you use to protect it? Let us build a community of knowledge down there.